Eliza Orzeszkowa, The Argonauts. Click the bell to get notifications about new videos. Chapter 12. Baron Emil said at times to Irene, "You have the aristocracy of intellect. Your mind is original. There is in you much delicate irony. You are not deceived with painted pots." These words caused her pleasure of the same sort as that which the praise of a mountaineer causes an inexperienced traveler when he tells him that he knows how to climb neck-breaking summits. Much irony had flowed into her mind from certain mysterious sides of her life, but she had become conscious of this now for the first time, under the guidance and influence of the Baron. He awed her by the originality of his language and ideas, by the absolute sincerity of his disbelief and his egotism. During childhood she had seen a mask which astounded her and struck her in the very heart. Thenceforth everything seemed better to her and more agreeable than masks. Moreover, the Baron was to her thinking a finished aesthete, an excellent judge in the whole realm of art, and in this regard she did not deceive herself greatly. The opinions on art and philosophy which he proclaimed interested her through their novelty, and the expressions which he used purposely, though sometimes brutal and verging on the gutter, roused her curiosity by their singularity and insolence. She imitated him in speech. In his presence she guarded her lips lest they might let something escape through which she would earn the title of shepherdess. "You are very far from the Arcadian condition, in which I meet people here at every step. You are intricate. You are like an orchid, one stem of which has a flower in the form of a butterfly, while the next seems like a death's head." She interrupted him with a brief laugh. "A butterfly is flat." Her laugh had a sharp sound, for the cold gleam of the Baron's eyes fell on her boldly and persistently. "No," contradicted he, "no. The combination of a death's head with a butterfly makes a dissonance that bites and sticks a new pin in the soul." "But the Greek harmony?" she inquired. With a flattering smile, which conquered her, the Baron answered, "Never mention harmony. That is the milk with which babes were nourished. We subsist on something else. You like game, do you not? But only when it begins to decay. There is no good game, except that which is rank. Very well, we subsist on a world in decay. This is true, but you speak of that darned sock, namely harmony. Ha! You think sometimes one way and sometimes another. Your soul is full of bites. You are idyllic and also satirical. You jeer at idyls, and still, at odd times, you yearn for one somewhat. Have I touched the point accurately? Are my words true?" "True," answered Irene, dropping her eyelids. She dropped her lids because she was ashamed of the discovery which the Baron had made in her, and for this cause as well, that she felt his breath on her face, and caught the odor of certain strange perfumes which came from him. His eyes sought hers and strove to pour into them their cold gleam, which was also a burning one. He strove to take her hand, but she withdrew it, and he, with lowered, drawling, and somewhat nasal tones, said, "You wish, and again you do not wish. You feel the cry of life in you and try to turn it into a lyric song." The cry of life. Over this phrase Irene halted later on, but briefly, touched as she had been by premature knowledge, its meaning became clear to her straightway. The Baron, small, fragile, with a faded face and irregular, was a master in calling forth the cry of life in women. His manner with them was exquisite, but also insolent. In his gray eyes, with the reddened edges of their lids, he had a look which was hypnotizing in its persistence and cold fire. It resembled the glitter of steel, pale and penetrating. In the manner in which he held the hand of a woman and placed a kiss on it, in the glances with which he seemed to tear her away from her shelter, in the intonation given to certain words, was attained the primitiveness of desire and conquest under cover of polished refinement. Amid the tedium and dissatisfaction of ordinary and exercised love-makers, this method seemed cynical, but bold and honest. It might have been compared to the shaggy head of a beast sticking out of a basket of heliotropes, which have ever the character of sameness as has their odor. The head is ugly, but smells of a cave and of troglodytes, which among common flowers of dull odor lend it the charm of power and originality. Irene thought at once of great-grandfatherliness, when in presence of the Baron her nerves quivered like cords when touched in a manner unknown up to that time. She asked herself, "Am I in love?" But when he had gone, this question called from her a brief, ironical smile. She analyzed and criticized the physical and moral personality of the Baron with perfect coolness, and at moments with a shade of contempt even. A vibrio. This expression contained the conception of physical and moral withering, almost the palpable picture of an existence which merely quivers in space and is barely capable of living. In comparison with this picture, she had a presentiment of some wholesome, noble, splendid strength. Disgust for the Baron began to flow around her heart and rise to her lips with a taste that was repulsive, and to her brain with a thought that was bitter. Why is this world as it is? Why is it not different? But perhaps it was different somewhere else, but not for her. She had ceased to believe in an idol. She had looked too long, and from too near a point, at the tragedy and irony of things to preserve faith in idols. Maybe there were idols somewhere, but not in the sphere where she lived. They were not for her. To yearn for that which perhaps did not exist at all, which most assuredly did not exist for her. What a rheumatism of thought that would be. Her head, with a Japanese knot of fiery hair on the top of it, bent down low, for the stream of lead from her heart was rising. With a movement usual to her, she clasped her long hands, and squeezing them violently, thought, "Well, what of it? I must in every case create some future, and why should any other be better than this one? Here at least is sincerity on both sides, and a just view of things." As time passed, she said to herself that what she felt for the Baron was love of a certain kind, and that at the foundation of things there is no other love. And if there is any other kind, it does not signify much, for each kind passes quickly. She began in general to attach less and less weight to that side of life, and also life itself had for her a charm which was continually decreasing. In the gloom of weariness and the apathy into which she was falling, that which connected her with the Baron was like a red electric lantern shining on a throng in the street and in the darkness. It was not the bright sun, nor the silvery moon. It was just that red lantern which, shining on a throng in the street, enabled one to see many curious or brilliant objects. She knew of Lily Kurth and the role which she played as to the world in general and the Baron in particular. The Baron, in that case, as in others, wore no mask. Sometimes he accompanied Lily Kurth to public promenades, and sometimes even showed himself with her in a box at the theater. That was in contradiction with morals, especially in view of his relation with Irene, but subjection to morals, would not that be standing guard over graves, or the darned sock? In this case Marian, without knowing why, did not applaud his friend. "C'est crâne, mais trop cochon," judged he, and he pooted a little at the Baron, but looked with curiosity at his sister, also present in the theater. Irene sat in her box as usual, calm and full of distinction, a little formal, never charmed with anything, or laughing at anything. As usual, she conversed with the Baron between acts, till Marian, looking at her, sneered and asked, "How did your vis-a-vis please you?" "Qui cette fille?" asked Irene carelessly. The color of her hair is superb, pure Venetian gold, no feeling of offense or modesty. "Bravo," said Marian, and with comical solemnity in his voice he added, "Dear sister, you have a new mentality altogether. You have surpassed my expectations, and now I shall call you my true sister." Why? Was she to be naive in a theater? She knew well that such things were done everywhere, and they must exist in the life of the Baron. And if they must exist, then let them be open, for mysteries. Oh, she preferred anything to masks and mysteries. Besides, the question was mainly in this, that history of the Baron and the famous singer of chansonnettes did not concern her in any way. One evening outside the windows of the house began the twilight, which was rather pale from snow. In the drawing-room sat Irene amid the cold whiteness of sculpture, which adorned the walls, and the reflection on polished furniture of blue watered silk. The young lady was seated at one of the windows on a high stool. On the background of the window pane, filled with the whitish twilight, her figure seemed tall, with narrow shoulders, and her profile somewhat too prolonged. Over this profile rose a knot of fiery hair, and the whole figure reminded one of a statue of a priestess, erect and smiling enigmatically. Her eyelids were drooping, her long hands were clasped on her robe, but the smiles wandering over her lips and ever-changing were not those of satisfaction. She remembered that in recent days she had met the Baron oftener than before. He strove more and more to see her, to meet her. He simply pursued her, found her frequently in shops which she visited with her mother, or alone. When he came, he did not shield himself with the excuse of chance, but said with his usual sincerity, "I willed today to see you, and I see you. I know how to will." This day she had barely entered the shop of a celebrated tailor when he entered also, and immediately, with unusual animation, began to tell her of his great project of going to America and settling there for a long time, perhaps permanently. He was roused by that idea. He was almost enthusiastic. The hope of new scenes and impressions, perhaps great profits, had fired his imagination. Of these last he spoke also to Irene. One must move, rouse courage, bring the nerves into action, otherwise they may wither. One must conquer and win. He who does not gain victories deserves the grave. Money is an object worthy of conquest, for it opens the gates of life. William Morris is a famous poet and artist, but he became a manufacturer. He understood that contempt for industry is like many other things, a painted pot. Men made this pot, and poets painted it in beautiful colors. Then the poets died of hunger. America holds in reserve new horizons. He spoke long and was astonished himself at his own enthusiasm. "I thought," said he, "that I should never know enthusiasm, and I supposed even that it was a rheumatism of thought. Meanwhile I feel enthusiasm, yes, enthusiasm, and it pervades me with a delightful shiver. Do you not share it? Are you not attracted, as well as I, by distant perspectives, new horizons, the divine vibrations of blue seas, the silences traversed by worlds, by angels?" And plagiarizing, he repeated the addition made by Marion, "and by millions." Yes, she was attracted, not by the millions, she was too familiar with them, but the distant perspectives, the new horizons, the shoreless expanses of oceans, and the endless quiet of spaces which in the twinkle of an eye were unfolded before her imagination. The dull pain and the gloomy disgust which tortured her not long before cried out, "Yes, yes, yes, go, fly far as possible under new skies, among people of another nationality. Go, fly, seek." With a slight flush on her cheeks, which were delicate to the highest degree, she told all this to the Baron, whose crumpled, faded face was gleaming with delight. "You make me happy, really happy," whispered he, and added, "Command me to bow down before you. I will obey and bow down." Meanwhile, a doorbell was heard every moment in the great shop, and a wave of people passing by reminded Irene of the reason why she was there. She turned to an elegant apartment in which a flood of materials disposed on the furniture was waiting for her. The Baron had a knowledge of the wearing apparel of ladies. He liked to speak of it, and more than once, with the accuracy of a tailor and the pleasure of an artist, he told of the original and peculiar toilets seen in capitals. On this occasion, in the tailor's apartment between great mirrors, in the flood of unfolded materials, he said, "I beg you not to dress according to pattern. I beg you not to spoil my delight by forcing me to see on you any of the ridiculous styles of this city. I meet no ladies here of subtle taste. There is wealth, frequently there is even taste, but common, according to pattern. For you it is necessary to think out something new, something symbolic, or rather something which symbolizes. A woman's dress should be a symbol of her individuality. For you it is necessary to think out a dress which would symbolize aristocracy of soul and body." And he fell to thinking out, and they both fell to thinking out. They selected among colors and kinds of materials. They examined specimens, drawings. The Baron corrected them, completed them with details taken from his own fancy. After a certain time they agreed to one thing. Her dress should be flame color. With Irene's delicate complexion and her fiery hair, this would, as the Baron thought, form a whole which would be irritating. In this robe you will be novel and irritating. The proprietor of the shop, elegant and important, came in and went out, inquired, advised, and again left them to their own thoughts and decisions. They, on their part, amused themselves better and better, surrounded by a light cloud of perfumes which rose from their clothing, and by the rustle of silks which fell to their feet, like cascades of many colors. The flame-colored material was selected. Still they went on selecting. The Baron, with a flush appearing on his cheeks, exclaimed, "We are passing the time most delightfully, are we not? And who could have expected it? At a tailor's. But you and I know how to experience sensations which no one else can experience. For that it is necessary to have a sixth sense. You and I have the sixth sense." Irene began to lose her usual formality and air of distinction. She spoke quickly and much. She laughed aloud, and, a number of times, the movement of her bosom and arms became irregular, too lively at moments, but they were full of a half-dreamy gracefulness. The Baron grew silent and looked at her for a while. Then, with rapturous eyes, he began, "How you are changed at this moment! How charmingly you are changed! Such surprises interest one. They irritate. You have the rare gift of causing surprises." With gleaming eyes, he begged her insistently to tell him whether the change which had taken place, the humor into which she had fallen, was spontaneous or artificial, the result of feeling or of coquetry. "You are without doubt the product of high training, so it is difficult to know in you that which is nature and that which is art. And such a person in that changed form is problematical. I beg you to tell me whether in you this is nature or art." Listening to these words, in which a very insolent idea was contained, she laughed and turned her eyes away. But bending toward her with a smile which might remind one of a satyr, and with a request in his voice, he asked, "Is this nature? Is it art?" With a sudden resolve she answered, "It is nature." And she wished to equal the boldness of her answer with the boldness of her look, but a flaming blush shot over her face, and the lids covered her eyes, into which shame had gushed forth. Though maiden modesty was a painted pot, this new change, to which Irene had yielded, exercised on the Baron a new irritating influence. In the midst of the rustling materials, he seized both her hands. His eyes flashed magnetic rays into her flushed face. He drew her delicate form toward him. She tried to twist her hands away, and with a violent effort strove to throw her bust backward, but the fragile Baron was very strong at that instant. He pressed her hands in his as in a vice, and whispered into her very face, "Do not fight against that cry of life which is heard within you. I am a despot. I know how to will." With the last word he pressed his lips to hers. But that moment she, too, gained unexpected strength, and in a flash she was some steps away from him, very pale now and trembling throughout her whole body. "This is too much of nature," cried she. Her head was erect, and from her eyes came flashing sparks, which soon melted, however, into cold irony. Shrugging her shoulders, with a smile she exclaimed, "Dieu, que c'était vulgaire!" Then, holding her skirt with both hands, as if she wished not to take one atom of dust from that room with her, she went out into the shop. The Baron saw her talk to the tailor for a moment with her usual coolness, and then turned to go with the ordinary words of brief leave-taking. But now Irene, sitting there on that tall stool at the window, surrounded by the fading gleam of the blue-watered silk, and against the background of the pane which was covered with a whitish gloom, seemed a statue with a delicate bust, and a somewhat prolonged profile settled in stony fixedness. The cry of life possessed as words the charm of novelty and daring, but when changed into an act, it roused in her every feeling of offense and maiden modesty. The shaggy beast had ventured out too far from behind the heliotropes, and had given forth too rank a smell of the den and the troglodytes. "It is vulgar," cried she to the Baron, but she understood immediately that what had taken place was neither new, nor a rare thing, but as old as the human race, and as vulgar as the street is. The tailor's shop full of people, the ceaseless ringing at the doorbell, the noise of selling and buying, the passage beyond the window, is the street. A kiss received on the street. Street adventure, a quiver shot downward through her shoulders. Before her imagination passed the wretched forms of women trailing in the dusk of evening along the sidewalks. On her inclined face a blush came out. That painted pot called maiden, modesty, under the form of inherited instinct and woman's pride, was laboring in her untiringly and painfully. After a while its place was taken by disgust beyond expression. The Baron, whose single charm was in his subtlety, appeared now as a vulgar figure. That kind of mutual love which she had thought they felt for each other, when closely analyzed, reminded her of pictures in which fawns with goat-sword beards were chasing through the forest after nymphs. On Irene's lips a jeering, almost angry smile now fixed itself. What did he say? A sixth sense. Why a sixth sense in this case? Empty words. The Baron jeers at painted pots, but he makes them himself and paints them in the ancient colors. An idol is an old thing, and a den is old also, but the idol would be better than the den if only it existed. But where is it? Her eyes had never seen an idol, but they had seen what happens and takes place with loves of men and women, and with bonds which bear the name of sacred. Well, what is to be done with the Baron and America? Such contempt for everything, such disbelief in all things, such a contemptuous despising of everything, and of her own self as well, embraced her and possessed her, that at the end of the meditation she said to herself, "It is all one." She crossed her hands and pressed them firmly across her breast, bent her head somewhat and thought, "It is all one." A few tears, one after another, fell on her tightly clasped fingers. All one. If only the sooner. What sooner? Why sooner? With a slow movement she turned her face toward her mother's apartments. Her lips, which quivered, and the glistening tear which had fallen on them, had the same kind of expression that a child has when crying in silence. With brows raised somewhat, she whispered, "Mama." After a while, under those brows which were like delicate little flames, her eyes began to grow mild, to lose their tears and their irony, until they took on an expression of such delight as if they were looking at an idyll. Meanwhile the air, modified by the gray twilight, was cut by a bright moving line. This was Kara going from her father's study with Puff tugging at her skirt. She hummed a song as she went forward. When she saw her sister, she ceased humming and called out from the end of the drawing-room, "Do you know, Ira, father will dine with us today?" In her voice a note of triumph was heard. After many weeks, her father would sit for the first time with them at the family table, and then everything would go on as it should go. What it was that went ill, and why it went so, she knew not. But she had been observing, was astonished, and had fears. With that real sixth sense, which persons of keen sensitiveness possess, she felt something. She felt in the air a certain oppression, a certain trouble, and not knowing what these signified, nor whence they were coming, she suffered. In the very same way, organisms with supersensitive nerves feel the approach of atmospheric storms. Now she advanced with a short step, erect and slender, with Puff at her skirt, while she hummed joyously. When Irene entered her mother's study soon after, she saw, by the lamplight, a group composed of 3 persons. Sitting on the sofa, with glitters of black jet in her light hair, was Malvina Darvid. Nearby, in a low armchair, inclining toward her, was Marion, elegant as usual, and before him, with elbows resting on her mother's knees, knelt Kara, a bright blue strip lying across the black silk robe of her mother. "A picture deserving the eyes of Sarah and Rebecca," suggested Irene, going straight to the mirror before which she began, with raised arms, to arrange and modify the knot of hair on her head. Marion, in good humor, was imploring his mother to let him have her portrait painted by one of the most noted artists in the city. "His brush is famous. I cannot understand how, amid the effeteness of this city, a talent can rise which is so fresh and individual. In his landscapes there is a magnificent plein air, and as a portrait painter he knows how to seize the soul. My mother, let me have your soul enchanted into a portrait. Have you noticed that the eyes of some portraits look on us from beyond this world? There is an enchanted soul in them. Let me have your portrait painted by an artist from whose canvas comes a breath from beyond this world." He inclined his cherub head and kissed his mother's hand, which was resting on Kara's shoulder. "And kiss me too," cried Kara. "Sentiment," said Marion, straightening himself. "Beware of sentiment, little one. I, thy great-grandfather, say this to thee." "Splendidly expressed," exclaimed Irene from the mirror. "Kara's soul is so primitive, yours." "So decadent," put in Marion, "that you have a right to be called her great-grandfather." "I greet you, great-grandmother," laughed he at Irene. "I say this, mother, for, as you see, I understand my elder sister perfectly, but not the little one yet. However, that will come some time, surely soon. Mais revenons à nos moutons. How about the portrait?" Malvina laughed. Her face, greatly troubled an hour before, had grown young again. A certain sun-ray had pierced the thick cloud at that moment. She warded off the idea of the portrait. "Why? There are too many portraits of me already. Oh, too many!" "Caricatures," exclaimed Marion, "and none of them is mine. I beg a portrait for myself specially, my own exclusive property." "What for?" repeated Malvina. "Look at the original as often as you like. Better not have a portrait, then perhaps you will feel the need of seeing me oftener." "No reproaches, dear mother. Leave reproaches, threats. Let the whole patriarchal arsenal remain on that side, over there." With a gesture, he indicated the door leading to the interior of the house. Kara raised her head from her mother's knees, and her eyes glittered. "But on this side let there be only sweetness, only charm, only that precious, beautiful weakness, before which I am on my knees always. As to this, that I can see the original of the portrait when I wish, that is a question. We are grains of sand scattered over the world by the wind of interesting voyages." "Have you some plan of a journey again?" inquired Malvina, alarmed. "Yes. It is in indistinct lines yet, but is becoming more definite every day. This will be the step of a giant, fleeing before that rod with which the Almighty Father is pleased to beat his children." Again, with a gesture, he pointed to the door leading to the more distant apartments, and in the short laugh which accompanied his last words there was sarcasm, almost hatred. At the same moment he met Kara's eyes and asked, "Why look at me, little one, in that way? There are eyes, curious, anxious, and as frightened as those of a hunted deer. Why so curious? What do you fear?" Kara hid her face in her mother's dress, quickly. "But how would it please you, Mama, to make a trip with me to America?" called Irene from before the mirror. "Remember to subscribe,